I want to bring in now Lauren Speranza. She's the director of the Transatlantic Defense and Security Program at the Center for European Policy Analysis, and she joins us now from Washington, D.C. Ms. Speranza, good to see you. Russia's attacks seem to be growing more and more indiscriminate. What's the strategy behind that, if there is one?
Well, thanks for having me. I do think the strategy behind this is Russia is resorting to its traditional way of war. It's the playbook that we've seen in Georgia, in Chechnya, in Syria, which involves this kind of indiscriminate attacks that we're seeing, applying massive firepower, rockets, artillery, missiles against major population centers, essentially to try and rough up the city enough that it allows Russian forces to move in and to facilitate their occupation. And I do think there is a blatant disregard for what they are targeting with these strikes and these shellings. But part of this is also their strategy to try and break the resistance of the Ukrainian people. So I'm not surprised that we're starting to see this horrible humanitarian catastrophe take place.
Western nations worry that Russia might be planning a false flag operation to justify the use of non-conventional weapons. What's your take on that?
I do think it's a real concern. I mean, we saw through the U.S.'s strategy of kind of aggressive declassification of some of Russia's false flag operations before the initial invasion, that this is clearly in the Russian playbook to try and manipulate the information environment. But I think the Ukrainian people, at least, and now increasingly Western citizens are very much aware of these types of tactics. And I do think that the Russians may attempt something like this to justify the use of a chemical weapon. I think the use of a tactical nuclear weapon is considerably lower than that. But we've seen the use of these weapons in other contexts, and I do think there is great concern that that's a possibility here.
Now, while all of this is going on, the two sides met for the first time on the ministerial level in Antalya in Turkey. I want to show you a clip of what Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov said after the meeting. Let's listen in and then come back to you.
Are we planning to invade other countries? No, we are not. We didn't attack Ukraine. As we've explained many times, a situation directly threatening the security of the Russian Federation was created in Ukraine.
And Lauren Speranza is still with us. The Russian foreign minister, they're saying we didn't attack Ukraine and we're not planning to invade other countries. The first statement is, of course, false. We know that. What do you make of the second? Ukraine's and Russia's neighbors, especially those without a NATO membership, have been holding their breath for months now.
Right. Well, I think this underlines that the Kremlin cannot be taken at its word, of course. We can't believe anything we're hearing coming out of the Kremlin. And I do worry about the future of countries that don't have a NATO guarantee. I'm thinking about Georgia or Moldova, for example. The value of being part of the NATO alliance has been made crystal clear by all of these events. And I don't think that is a line that Putin wants to cross to invade a NATO ally. But I do think, other countries that are not part of that umbrella and have those security guarantees are at risk. Now, that said, I do think the Russian military forces are facing significant setbacks on the ground. This war is a lot more costly and time-consuming than Putin hoped it would be. So I do think in the long run, this is going to drain the Kremlin's willingness or desire for kinetic operations elsewhere. So while we might not see a conventional invasion in the short term, I do think they're going to continue to up the ante on political warfare and kind of other types of hybrid threats.
On Friday, Vladimir Putin is going to meet with Belarusian President Lukashenko. What's his role been in all of this?
Well, Lukashenko is trying to walk a very delicate line. I think, he likes to pretend that his country has no role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but his decision to dance to Moscow's tune is one of his own choosing. And he is contradicting himself in some of the statements, claiming that, Belarusian territory is not being used for certain strikes or as a conduit for Russia's invasion. But while he doesn't want to be dragged into a full-scale war with Ukraine, because I don't think that's in the populace's interest in Belarus, he also cannot be seen to be a traitor to Vladimir Putin, because he dug his own grave. He's completely dependent on Kremlin support. So both of those options would be disastrous for him if he can't balance these two.
Now, this operation is not going according to plan for Putin. You said it before, he's facing tough resistance and he doesn't have the money or troops to occupy the country. What do you think could be an off-ramp for him here?
Well, I think his invasion in the first place shows that he was never truly interested in diplomacy. So I don't think that there's any concession that the West can make to kind of end this neatly for Putin. Clearly, there is a lot of Ukrainian resistance. And I think the longer that this goes on, as you said, the more difficult it's going to be for Putin and the Kremlin to sustain. The sanctions are starting to squeeze. It's more difficult for him to be able to actually hold the territory. And even in the long run, I think Putin will be hard-pressed to be able to operate and build and sustain some of the critical infrastructure that's being destroyed in
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm really sorry. We're running out of time. Lauren Speranza, thank you so much for your insights.